if you're confused and lost at all about what we should be eating and what is the optimal diet for humans, then you have to understand and look into species specific diets. And all of your answers will be understood, and you won't have any questions about what other people are saying and what works for them, because you will know the truth about what humans should and should not be eating. So, species specific diet basically says that there are four different types of mammals on the earth, and each animal is distinct and categorized by the anatomy. And so the four categories are carnivores, herbivores, omnivores, and frugivores. So every animal fits into one of these four categories, and it's determined by the anatomical and physiological structures of the system. So, for example, carnivores, lions, tigers, have a very distinct anatomy that is easily recognizable and identifiably different from the other species. So, for example, they don't have sweat glands, they have fur, they have fangs. Their intestinal length is very short when compared to herbivores or frugivores. Um, they have hyperacidic stomachs, and on and on and on. And basically, the anatomy is designed in a way to handle and intake raw meat and bones. That is what the system is designed to consume. And when it comes to like herbivores, for example, it's a very different story. Now, cows, horses, giraffes, they may look different on the outside, but on the inside, anatomically, it's a very similar story across all herbivore animals. So they have like flat molars. Their teeth are designed to grind the vegetable matter because it needs to be ground up very well before it moves into the stomach. They have multiple stomachs. Their intestinal length is extremely long when compared to a carnivore's. Um, and that is for the entire purpose of being able to digest the plant matter efficiently, um, and in a way that it doesn't lose the nutrition before it exits the system, as it would in the carnivore, because it doesn't have enough transit time before it leaves. So then the anatomy determines what the diet is. And each animal in nature has no question about what it should be eating. You never find animals experimenting with different diets if they don't have to. You never find them just choosing varieties of foods. They all eat what they're designed to do, and they don't have a second thought about it. They intuitively understand, whereas humans don't for some reason. And it's an interesting paradox to think about, where we usually think that humans are the most evolved species on the planet, but we're the only species that has no idea about what we should and should not be eating. Interesting. I think there are many different reasons for this, but it's just a tell of how devolved the human species is in certain aspects. So we have carnivores, herbivores, omnivores, and frugivores. So if we look at frugivores, for example, which are like primates, like monkeys eat bananas, their anatomy is designed to handle fruit. So the question is, when you look at it all, what do humans most closely resemble? Do we look like carnivores, like cats, tigers? Do we look like herbivores that walk on four legs and eat plants and have multiple stomachs and have fur? Obviously not. Or do we look like primates, like monkeys? Like, obviously we look like monkeys. Our DNA is extremely similar to them. And what that means is that we are designed, our physical structure is designed to intake fruits, and that is the optimal dietary source for us. So once you understand that, it's undeniable as to what you should and should not be eating. It's not a question of scientific studies and what the experts say. You cannot disagree with the anatomical structure, and you have to base everything off of that to make your world of understanding in regards to nutrition. The problem with scientific studies is that they are limited in their scope of understanding, and we make grand statements out of small conclusions that they draw. Let aside the fact that, scientific studies are funded and purposed for certain results to be made. Um, and so it's not just this free flow of experiments from non-biased actors. Besides that whole point, they're limited in their scope of what they can draw conclusions to. And the more problematic aspect of this is that, um, especially even people in the scientific and nutritional community, is that we got brainwashed and tricked into believing that anything that we believe to be true or that we allow into our consciousness has to first be approved by the scientific world in lieu of a scientific study. And if it doesn't come from a scientific study, we can't even entertain the idea or the thought form about whatever the idea is. And that comes with a lot of problems. For one, you're just giving up your ability to reason and think deeply to an outside source, which is never a good idea. You know, people in the scientific community usually make fun of that uh, paradigm that exists in like religious extremism, where, well, if the Bible doesn't say it, it can't be true, or if my pastor doesn't say it, it can't be true. But people in the scientific world are doing the same thing that those people are doing, where they only allow things into their minds if it's approved by an outside higher source. And so scientific studies create a hard and low ceiling on the average person's nutritional understanding, because we're only allowed to look at certain information and really only limited information. So if you get beyond that though, and you understand the anatomy dictates everything first, and then the scientific studies are supposed to be supplementary to our understanding, then you can start to get a real grasp of how things work. But the major problem people run into, even if they understand this, is that, well, why do other people get results with different types of diets, and maybe this diet isn't doing the best or making me feel the best when I start transitioning into it? And you have to understand, when it comes to changes with the body, and specifically diet changes, is that even if you're doing something good, like changing your diet to a fruit-based diet, it may not feel good in the short term, but it may improve your long-term health. And by this I mean, the body is in constant detoxification mode. It is always trying to self-heal. It's never not doing that. It's its primary goal. Its only objective is to keep you alive for as long as possible. And so when the body is so overburdened in a nutritional sense with what it's forced to digest, and it's constantly digesting things, then it gets overworked and exhausted, and it puts things on the back burner, things that can wait till later. And so healing gets put on the back burner because it's just trying to deal with the day-to-day onslaught of poison that we're putting into it. It's easier to understand this if you look at like an extreme example of like drug addicts or alcoholics. So if you took a meth addict who'd been doing meth for many years at heavy doses, and you were to just cold turkey take away their drug, they would probably die of withdrawal symptoms, right? Now, if you were to give that same dose to a person who's never had a hard drug in their life, they would probably die of an overdose. So in this one situation, you have one substance that will kill a person if they don't get it, and it will kill a person if they take it. So it comes to this law of adaptation, and the body gets addicted to what it has to endure. And we get addicted in a real sense to the foods that we're eating, not because they're good for us, but because they are poisonous to us. And in order to survive the onslaught of poison, the body has to become addicted and conform to that substance. And so when you take that substance away, you start to get withdrawal symptoms. So for example, if you take an alcoholic and you start to slowly wean them off the alcohol, they will go through withdrawal symptoms, and they will go through a period of weeks, possibly months, depending on the state of their body, where they feel worse when compared to when they were drinking. And so you would say, well, the alcohol is actually making them feel better. But no one in their right mind would say that the alcohol is a healthy thing for them, right? But it makes them feel better because their body's addicted to it. And so when you start to remove the addictive substance, you suffer. Not because the body's starting to lose its vitality and health and go downhill, but because the body's getting the ability to start detoxifying and removing the poison within it. And in that process, we suffer. So the body sequesters poisons within cells, um, and it doesn't want to do this, but it does it because it has to. It's reached its, over many years, every day, it's reached its toxicity threshold that it can detoxify. And what it can't detoxify, all the extra just gets sequestered and stored for later in the fat cells, for a time when the body can actually get rid of it. Now, when it does that, it slowly lowers the vitality because you just introduce more poison into the system. It slowly starts to degrade it. But when you remove the input of poison and the body gets this ability to start detoxifying itself, then what will happen is that it's like finally the pathway for it to get removed is open, and it will start taking the poison out of the cells and put it into the bloodstream so that it can get to the liver for detoxification. Now, in that process, you feel the poison in the blood, which makes you feel like crap, and it'll give you detoxification symptoms, which vary from person to person. But it can be confusing if you start to do these diet changes in an extreme way and you start to feel worse. And it's not because the food's making you feel worse at all, but it's allowing your body the ability to start detoxifying itself and doing this hard work that it hasn't been able to do, but it desperately wants to do. And when that happens, we suffer. And so diet changes can be very confusing, and people only look in the short term of what their experience is. And so there are many people that go on a fruit-based diet, a raw vegan diet, and they start to feel worse in the beginning, and they just stop the experiment and say, well, this diet doesn't work for me at all because it's making me feel bad. But that's not the case at all. And really, the true answer to health is the longer you can go without a stimulation, whether it's from food or whatnot, the healthier you are. So people that are extremely healthy and have worked on their nutritional intake over many years can go days without eating a thing and feel totally fine and maintain their normal lives. Whereas the average person, if you don't let them eat a meal or two, they're going to be suffering extremely by the time dinner comes because they haven't got their hit of the poison. And when that happens, you start to go through withdrawal symptoms very soon. So if you can understand that aspect of how the body detoxifies in regards to its nutritional intake, you can understand much better what we should be eating and why we feel worse when we eat certain foods and why we feel better when we eat other foods. Now, that being said, if you were to continue on a fruit-based diet for a longer time and you push through the detox symptoms, you would eventually get to a place where you feel amazing, much better than you've ever felt before. But there's also this thing of transition, which is very important to the body. The body does not like abrupt changes, and it likes to do things slowly over time. And so the most people that get into trouble in this case is when they go from one extreme to the other. Even if it's from a bad extreme to a good extreme, it can be too much too fast for the body. And it's just offloading so much poisons, and it's just too much. And so it wants a small gradual change to get you there. Our minds work much faster than our bodies work, and so we want to be somewhere when our bodies are not totally there yet, which creates a lot of the problems. So if you understand this about nutrition, it makes it much easier to comprehend what we should not be eating, and why we get into trouble when we eat the things that we shouldn't, and why the world is just so confusing and nobody agrees out there about what we should be eating. But I'll leave you with this. If you think about it, like I said earlier, that all animals understand what they should be eating and they don't have a problem with this. If you were left out in nature and you didn't have society to build and sustain you up, and you were just to live off the land, what would you be eating, right? Ideally, the people who would flourish the most would be the people who lived near the tropics, who had seasonal fruit year-round. They wouldn't have to go hunt for food. They wouldn't have to grow vegetables, which don't have a lot of calories in them. They would be able to pick seasonal fruits and just eat them and not have to work for it. And so those people would flourish the most. And if you didn't have processed convenience foods around you all the time, well, what would be the most appealing thing? Trying to hunt down and eat an animal's flesh, or eating tasty fruit off of a tree? what sounds more appealing? Obviously, it's the fruit. It looks appealing to us, it smells good to us, it's sweet, it has the carbohydrates. It's our main primary fuel source is carbohydrates. It's ideal for us. So if you just think about logic and nature, it makes much more sense. We have this reciprocal relationship with the environment. Our bodies are alkaline by design and acid by function, which means that our internal environment needs to be slightly alkaline, and our exports, urine, feces, sweat, are all acid by nature. And nature is the opposite. So it's acid by function, alkaline by design, which means that plant matter needs acid soil, it needs CO2. Its inputs need to be acid based, and its exports, oxygen, and fruits and vegetables, are alkaline by nature. So we need what they give out, and they need what we give out. So we live in this constant cycle where our byproducts feed them and their byproducts feed us. So once you get out of the acid alkaline cycle of that, then you start to get into problems because then your body becomes too acidic. And so you look, what are the alkaline foods in nature? Fruits and vegetables. Meats, extremely acidic. Grain products are acidic. Everything else is primarily acidic, and that creates and festers disease in the body. So if you look at nature, it becomes very easy to understand what we should and should not be eating.